Welcome to LC Screen Talk. My name is Larry, and this is the latest in my Rotten Tomatoes Got It Wrong for every year in the 2010s series. And today we're discussing 2014. If you're not familiar, this series explores each year of the 2010 decade as I bring on a special guest and we both discuss 5 films that we think are over and underscored on the tomato meter. Now, these are just our personal lists, our own opinions, and it's all just meant to be taken in some light fun. And a fun way to discuss films throughout the decade as we bring the 2010s to a close. So today, joining me to discuss the year of 2014, I have Brett Murphy from BAMTube TV. So Brett, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Hey folks, first off, I just wanted to say thank you to Larry. That being said, let's get down to business. 2014 was definitely a mixed year for movies, giving us some of the decade's best, like The Imitation Game, Interstellar, and Nightcrawler, among many others. But somehow also managed to give us some of the decade's worst, with the likes of Annabelle, I, Frankenstein, and Transformers: Age of Extinction. And we all know that the critics aren't always right. And in the case of these 5 movies, they were dead wrong. The first movie I have chosen to go with today is The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1, which currently holds a 69%. This movie is easily the worst in the Hunger Games series. It's just so boring. Nothing happens in this entire movie. Literally nothing. The only bit of action that occurs in the entire film is shown in the trailer, and that is when Katniss shoots down one of the capital ships, and instead of it being epic and badass, it instead crashes into a local hospital, killing everyone inside, and instead hurt the hero rather than making her look super cool. There was no need whatsoever to split this final movie into 2 parts. It's essentially 2 hours of filler so that the studio could milk as much money as they possibly could out of this franchise before it came to an end. The next one on my list is Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. It's no secret that the original Sin City is one of the best comic book movies of all time. Grim, true to the source material, and unapologetically violent. And this sequel was pretty much the same. So why, oh why, did the critics only give it a 43%? Although this one isn't quite as enjoyable as the original Sin City, it's really not far behind it. And for all the same reasons, you are taken back to Sin City with many characters that you loved from the original and a few new nice additions like Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Josh Brolin. They managed to craft a sequel that acted as both a sequel, a prequel, and a sort of spin-off. I enjoy the hell out of this movie, and I know many others that do, so I really can't quite figure out why the Rotten Tomatoes critics didn't. And now I'm going to follow that one up with another sequel, being 300: Rise of an Empire, which currently holds a 45%. Okay, so this one may seem a bit like retread territory. Let's go over why. It's another sequel based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller, where the original was praised, and it stars Eva Green. Again, this was one I was never quite able to figure out. I enjoy it almost as much as the original 300. I can sort of see where some people are coming from, as this one does feel more stylized than the original 300. The blood effects really aren't that good at all. But it is much more fleshed out. You are not following just the Spartans, you are doing a bit of jumping around, and you're also getting some backstory for Xerxes. And Eva Green as Artemisia is a complete badass. This one did quite a lot of universe expanding, and to be quite frank with you, I wouldn't be too disappointed in seeing a sequel to this one as well. After that, we are going to be continuing along the sequelitis train with The Hobbit: The Battle of the Five Armies, which, as of right now, sits at a 59%. Okay, I'm just gonna come out and say this because we're all thinking it. This is easily the worst in the Middle-earth saga. But really, that's not saying much. Those are some pretty big shoes to fill. The biggest glaring problem is just the glorified CGI used in this movie. Rather than having the orcs being people in costumes and makeup like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, it is just folks in mocap suits, and it didn't turn out that well. That being said though, this movie is still quite enjoyable. Again, it is not the best. In fact, it is the worst in the Middle-earth saga, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It is just rotten, but for no good reason whatsoever. It very much should be a fresh movie. And of course, in typical fashion, I saved the best for last because I know I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this one. And that is It Follows, which has a whopping 96%. Why? oh why does it have a 96%? The premise of this movie is fantastic, don't get me wrong. And the performances as well were super solid. And the score, oof, don't even get me started on the score because that is some damn fine composing. It's haunting, it's riveting, and it's captivating, and makes the movie a lot better than it has any right to be. But how, with all of those positives, did it manage to be a boring mess of a movie? I see people praising this all the time, and for the life of me, I cannot comprehend why. All the pieces were there, they just had to bring it together, and for me, it just didn't work. 96% completely undeserving. I don't think it deserves to be certified fresh or fresh at all. It doesn't have to be rotten. I'm not talking like 10% territory here, but there are movies on this list that certainly should be higher than this. Alright, so those are my top 5 picks. Thank you so much once again to Larry for allowing me to be a part of this. It has been a great time, a total blast, and I cannot wait to see what my other fellow YouTubers can come up with.
Thank you so much for being here on the channel, Brett. I really appreciate you taking out the time to make the video and participate in the series. I'm glad we finally got the chance to collaborate here on YouTube. Everyone, make sure that you are subscribed to BAMTube TV here on YouTube for all of your Cinema Showdown needs, as well as other film-related content. And make sure that you are following them over on Twitter and Instagram so you are always up to date on getting those votes in for the showdowns. So of course, all of that social media information and links will be included in the description down below. So now, for my picks on the films the Tomato Meter missed the mark on for 2014. I have to say, this was a year where I had a couple of glaring differences from overall critical consensus, but for the most part, I don't have that many controversial opinions. It was a little bit of a struggle to find the full 5 of 2014 for me. But let's go ahead and kick things off with a film I think deserved just a little bit more love, and that is Draft Day. The Draft Day is currently just barely rotten at 59% on the Tomato Meter, but I think it is a really solid film. Going through the draft process is not a particularly exciting process, honestly. I mean, you're literally just kind of waiting around for a guy to walk out, announce a team and who they picked. They put the cap on the guy and we move on to the next team. It's not a big, crazy, exciting process. Of course, you are excited as you watch, waiting for your team to announce their new player. And of course, most NFL fans know about, trading up, trading down, trying to work deals. But this movie did such a great job at bringing this energy and this kineticism to the entire process. It really kept me engrossed in the process and in Kevin Costner's character throughout the film, start to finish. Plus, I do think Kevin Costner is really solid in this movie. All of our cast is. The story is really interesting, and I had a good time with it. Now, that may just be, the football fan in me talking and just kind of liking being part of the process in general, but I don't think this should be rotten on the Tomato Meter. I think in the 70 percentile is definitely fair for a solid film like this, personally. Now we're gonna get into the dodgy parts, y'all. Speaking of 70 percentile, let's talk about a movie that I don't think should be that high. And it's Interstellar. I know, throw the tomatoes, but it just doesn't do it for me, y'all. Interstellar from director Christopher Nolan currently sits at a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now this film is just so frustrating to me because there is so much in here that I do love, that I think is done expertly well. When we're dealing with the passing of time, I think it's actually such an interesting, really riveting and complex issue. Plus, these different planets and what we explore while we're on them is a different take from what we're used to seeing when it comes to, space adventure. Getting these water planets and the like. And of course, the acting is wonderful, the Hans Zimmer score is also great, and the direction from Nolan is really strong. So why do I think it doesn't even deserve a 72%? Because I think it completely collapses. People say, you know, oh, this is the most scientific we can get about black holes, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of research went into this, yada, yada, yada. For me, it collapsed in that third act, like hard. I hated the ending to Interstellar. And not just the ending, like as we start unraveling that third act, it just falls apart completely for me. Plus, I don't know how this won the sound awards at the Oscars because the score is fantastic, but there are several times throughout this movie where I can't hear the dialogue. Like the sound and the music overwhelms everything, including characters that are trying to speak. So that's a huge misfire for me on a technical aspect of the film. I wish we had just stayed with a more human story. We had grounded this in these characters' actual stories instead of trying to go this super philosophical, super out there, really existential type of route that does bring it back to the humanism of it all. But at that point, I'm just like, but really? Really? I don't know. I didn't buy it. I didn't like it. And when your third act just like bottoms out like that, I was like, oh gosh. Well, oh, no, no, no. I probably would have went into the 50% personally. Sorry. Sorry, Nolan fans. Now the Nolan fans are really going to come for me with my next pick of films I think are underrated that are given a hard stick of things. And that's Divergent, sitting at a 42% on the tomato meter. Now listen, part of evaluating film for me personally is honestly intent versus the final product. What is it that you are intending to make and how close is it that you come to fulfilling that? And I think Divergent is a perfectly good young adult dystopian future film. I was really intrigued with the idea of all of these different subsects of the society and the idea of a Divergent. It really had me intrigued for another film. There are certainly plenty of flaws in here, but I think the action is serviceable. The acting is all solid. And our main character and that little love interest really worked for me. It may not be as good as the original Hunger Games was, but it's certainly not a disaster. It's not one of the low tiers when it comes to the young adult dystopian future adaptations we received. And I think it just got kind of an unfair shake of it all. So I would put Divergent probably in the 60s somewhere, but it definitely would be fresh to me. So next up, for overscored in 2014, I have Boyhood. I know, right? I know. Everybody's like favorite heading into Oscar season for Best Picture. Boyhood presents plenty of aspects I can appreciate and enjoy. Of course, I appreciate this really innovative way of storytelling from Richard Linklater, but it's definitely a Richard Linklater movie in so many ways. And Linklater as a filmmaker is so hit or miss for me. And this really confounds most of the things I don't really enjoy about his films. It is so long. And it's a slice of life type of film, but I'm not interested in the aspects of life it's exploring. It's cool, I guess, to see somebody grow up before your eyes, but I just didn't really care. I didn't care. And that was my biggest problem here. The script was fine. The filmmaking was great. The acting was all very good, but I just didn't care about the story. Thus, I was bored. And that's really what it comes down to. Is there's no actual story, there's no actual plot, there's no actual movement. So if you're like me and not really caring about these like little trivial smoking and like rebellious teen stuff that we've got going on and this family and whatever they're going through, then you're just kind of sitting there and it ends up being way too long for what it's trying to present. So I could never get really on board with Boyhood. As I said, I appreciate it as a piece of film, but I'd probably put it down in the 60 percentile. Barely fresh, just because I appreciate it on a filmmaking level, but certainly a far cry from 97% for me. And then finally, my final film is one probably everybody else forgot even existed, and that was Wish I Was Here, which is from director and star Zach Braff. I certainly don't think this is as good as Garden State, Zach Braff's directorial debut, but I still found it to be a really affecting kind of coming of age story. I think Zach Braff is really endearing as our main character, but we have Kate Hudson, who does a fantastic job, and Joey King, who is wonderful in this movie. Plus, we delve into some deep issues with her character that are handled beautifully, and really that exploration with their relationship with her is wonderful. We have, of course, the struggles and benefits of homeschooling. We delve into a lot of issues with just parenting, with finding who you are and being accepted. And it all really worked for me. It has a nice ethereal feel to it. It has this kind of like dream-like state that Zach Braff, I think, really likes to lean into. And honestly, when it's done well, I really enjoy it. And I do think it was done well here. And I don't know why. It really didn't catch on, obviously, with audiences because the box office wasn't very good. And clearly, critics didn't go for it either, indicated by its 46% tomato score. But I enjoyed it and I was on board, so that's why I had to include it as one of my underscored films of 2014. So that's it. Those are my picks as well as Brett's picks for the under and overscored films of 2014. What did you think about the movies we selected? And more importantly, let us know the films you think the tomato meter got wrong in 2014. So make sure you comment those down below, or you can hit either one of us up on Twitter. Also, make sure that you are subscribing to BAMTube TV. Show Brett and the team some love. And while you're here, make sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on my latest videos, including all of the new episodes in this Rotten Tomatoes Got It Wrong series. I love you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!